Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Woodford County Board of Education via video teleconference to order. Sorry. We good?
Yeah.
Okay. For roll call, all members are present, I believe. Ms. Richardson, are you here?
No, she's not. She must not have gotten in that link yet. Let's see.
All right, we will have to pause our meeting until Ms. Richardson has an opportunity to join, so it'll be just a moment.
She can't get in right now, so let me see if I can get her a code. I just sent her the link.
Okay.
She says she's got it. There she comes.
All right. Ms. Richardson,
Okay.
are you able to hear us now?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, well, we will resume again in our roll call. So all members are present, as is our student rep, Ms. McCowan. And if you will all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is proposed amendments to the agenda, and I do have a couple of things to ask on this. If we could, please, I'd like to move agenda item G under the regular agenda, which is entitled Recruitment of Diverse Superintendent Candidates, to the beginning of the regular agenda. Mr. Martin is double booked tonight, so we'll take his item first so that he can make it to another meeting. And then with the board's support, I would like to add an agenda item H, which will be appointment of board member to the superintendent screening committee. We had intended for this to be on the agenda and just missed it, unfortunately, an oversight on my part. So I'll make a motion to add that agenda item. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Glass. Any discussion? The reason that we're adding it is to be in compliance with the 30-day window from notification of a vacancy.
I just had some discussion. I know that we are going to be discussing a communication from a community member about the agenda and how we handled the agenda last month, and then so this edition kind of begs that same question. Mr. Chenoweth, I know there's a specific way that we are able to add agenda items. Would adding this item in this manner be in line with our policy, or do we need to do anything differently?
The language, I believe, that is referenced in the policy contemplates an emergency as a basis for adding an agenda item. That is a self-imposed restriction, understanding that we're trying to beat a deadline that's imposed by statute. This item does need to be addressed and ought to be dealt with tonight. So while it probably doesn't fit the definition of emergency that's self-imposed in that policy, it is a matter of urgency because it has a deadline that needs to be met. So all of that parliamentary procedure aspect of that policy is all subject to being waived by the board. You all have discussed at multiple meetings that the screening committee process is underway. So anybody who's interested in the superintendent search process should not be surprised that an aspect of that is on the agenda tonight. And that's the reason for that policy language, is to make sure people that are interested in a matter have noticed that it's going to be discussed or voted on in a board meeting. So it definitely fits that. This is the appointment of the board member of the screening committee is definitely within the scope of what the public knows is on the agenda tonight.
And I guess my second question would be to Mr. Martin. I know statute dictates how this process works. Is it required that the board vote on this, or is this something we can simply discuss as part of an existing agenda item and not have it added? How does that work?
Mr. Martin, I think you're on mute. Mr. Martin, you're on mute. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You know,
if you could start.
A common problem with virtual. The statute says selected by the board chair.
Okay. So
it is not a voted on item. Probably 40 to 50% of the searches I've completed, the board chair chooses themselves. The other 50 to 60% of the time, they'll choose another board member.
So, but I think the recommendation that you had given was that that action needed to take place in a meeting. Was that right?
Mr. Chenoweth, I've never been asked that question about, is it in a board meeting, or board minutes have to reflect that at some point?
I would, for that to be a discussion, for the board chair to ask if anybody volunteers. All of that discussion happening in a board meeting is better than it happening by a series of conversations. So even if it's not a board vote tonight, the discussion of that, or the taking of names that are volunteering for that duty, I think it's fair game to be discussed and appropriate to be discussed by the board in a meeting.
I agree.
Okay, and then to be in compliance with the 30-day window, we would need to act on that. We do not have a meeting scheduled that would be within that window. So are you saying it needs to be a series of meetings with a discussion, or no?
No,
Okay.
I'm saying you can do that tonight within the screening committee being already on the agenda item, or already an agenda item. It doesn't need to be an action item for the board to vote on. You can just discuss it tonight, and you can make your decision to be recorded in the minutes tonight.
Okay, just to be clear, the screening committee is not on the agenda. We had discussed adding it and did not get it added. That's why I was requesting an additional agenda item be added for this.
Right, but the reason I say it's already on the agenda is, I mean, Mr. Martin is here. A discussion of the process is already an agenda item, and the agenda just needs to be topical. So the fact that he's here to discuss recruitment of superintendent, I take that to broadly be that superintendent selection is broadly on the agenda tonight.
Okay. Then is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding agenda item H, appointment of board member to the superintendent screening committee, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
no.
The motion carries 4-1. All right, Mr. Hawkins.
Before we move on, I've got a question about the proposed amendments to the agenda. I noticed that board member communications has been moved. It's always come after the Pledge of Allegiance, and I just wondered who asked for it to be moved and why.
I did. I thought that it would go better since we were gonna go around. I thought that allowing Mr. Hawkins to do his remarks before we got into that and after we had done the consent and regular agenda would be a good spot to do it since we were changing kind of what was being asked with communications from what had traditionally been asked.
I don't really have a problem with it being moved. However, I think if we are going to have anything on the agenda that involves board members having discussions with any of our agents, then that should be disclosed prior to the discussions and prior to any votes. So for instance, tonight we have the recruitment of diverse candidates on the agenda. So if any board members have had discussions with our attorney or with Mr. Martin or others, then I would ask that they just disclose that information prior to us discussing and voting on these items. And that happens each meeting.
Okay. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to our February Board of Education meeting. The last week has certainly been a challenge with the winter weather, but I'm certainly thankful we had the ability to continue learning with our virtual option. I know this is not always easy, but our staff and students showed such resilience as we navigated yet another challenge during the school year. I think I can speak for everybody that we are looking forward to spring. This Friday, our staff will have the opportunity to get the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. We're very grateful that Governor Beshear has prioritized educators in the rollout, and we appreciate the great partnership we have with the Woodford County Health Department, as they have done a fantastic job with the planning and with working with our staff to get everyone vaccinated. Just a reminder that we will have an all virtual day for all students this Friday because of the vaccine administration. We are extremely happy to see our case numbers go down across the county, and we are currently in the orange zone on the state incidence map. So we have not been there in several months. So we will certainly be checking those numbers again later in the week, and the plan for next week will be announced either Thursday evening or Friday morning. Thank you again for tuning in this evening. It's an honor to serve as your superintendent, and I know with all of us working together, we can become the flagship school district in Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Asher, if you could do the instructional and equity and task force updates, please.
Certainly, and good evening. Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
To build upon the term you navigate and Mr. Hawkins used, that's exactly what I'm starting with, because we do continue to try to navigate the circumstances. And the past 2 weeks, as he mentioned, we had to do just that. And while it's not easy, teachers and schools, they've become more adept at being able to flip that switch back and forth. But nevertheless, very difficult, but kudos to them certainly for being able to do that. A couple of things that I wanted to mention tonight on instructional update is just looking forward in a not too distant future about what we're working on planning right now, one of which is summer school programming, that we started considering that and what that may look like. I believe I mentioned this last month, but what we're looking to do is build upon our successful structures and programs that we've had in years past, what worked during those years and how we can apply that again this year. Just in terms of the schedule that we've used, the curriculum, staff that we've used, and just other resources. Oh, and our summer feeding program, how we coordinated that to coincide and make sure to feed our kids each day. Overall, though, we intend to be more intensive as much as we can and intentional for obvious reasons to address gaps and things that have been missed throughout these interruptions. The focus at elementary and middle school have been on literacy in years past, and while that certainly will be the top priority, we've already decided that we'll also be incorporating a math component as well as social emotional learning for both of those levels. High school are still in development as well, but it's going to be a much more varied focus given that their primary intention will be on helping students recover those credits for their courses. But we're very much in the beginning stages of that. At this point, it's kind of started at elementary, working our way up, meaning that we've surveyed teachers of who may be interested, kind of giving them a rough outline of what weeks we're looking at in the summer, and then we have that to plan from there. I'll stop there. Any questions about summer school program, where we're at?
I just wanted to double check. With summer school, it sounds like it's going to be a lot larger. That it's just in the past, it's been kind of a very focused, small kind of thing. So it sounds like, is that going to be something that's available to all students, or just all students that are, kind of behind?
We're going to focus on students, and I don't know that need extra support. So we're going to start there. One concern we do have is having available staff. I mean, it's been a rough year. It's been a rough year. So we may have to stretch the staff that we do have available over the course of the summer. So you certainly got to take that into consideration. So that's why I said we started with surveying staff that might be interested in working. But we're going to need to start with that priority group first, and then we'll build out from there.
And is the summer school something that we can use some of the pandemic assistance funds for?
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely.
So even if the legislation happens, we
The
still...
second round of ESSER funds can definitely be utilized for summer programming.
Well, I definitely commend the focus to be on the recovery and the gaps that have really just are probably in every single household for every single student over the past, year and a half. So I definitely think that is absolutely what that assistance should be used for. And, I really am excited that you already have some things in place so you can just kind of build on those things. So, anything that we can do to support that, I definitely feel like that's something that the board would, or at least I, personally would be in favor of. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
So,
Okay. That was just on the summer school. The second thing, planning we have going on is actual virtual academy for 21-22. So not only will the health concerns probably still exist for many, but also just the way that school operates has changed for many families, and many have been successful in that virtual environment. So considering this, we are in the process of developing preliminary plans of what virtual academy may look like for next year. And Dr. Jones and I are leading this work to where we phased it out, where multiple groups. We just earlier this afternoon met with our teacher group that are virtual academy teachers currently to put together a structure. We will go through our district level teams, back to our principal teams, and ultimately what we're leading to is to survey our parents prior to spring break. And we would survey all parents of who might be interested, because a major factor in this planning is how many students might we have in virtual academy. You can't determine staffing, programming, any of that until you know what the interest level might be. So well into that process, but like I said, it's really going to be important to know how many students might be interested in virtual academy next year. Any questions on that?
I know it's early in the process as you're thinking about it, but are you still envisioning a system that you can flex back and forth at, say, the break of the semester for the older children to come in and out of school?
Well, yes, we'll need to be a little bit more rigid, but you said it right there. What we're considering is semester. So if you were to make a commitment, it would be through the semester and then a change point right at the middle of the year.
Okay. And is that for all grade levels?
Yes, what we're looking for is to have some consistency, district, K through 12 of what that may look like. And as you know, this year we've done that at each 9 weeks for elementary. It's a lot of planning, a lot of transition, so we want to be a little more rigid and consistent with how we do that.
Sure.
Well, and I do think that was a major cause of just concern and angst and just real issues for our students and our parents in the past. So I think, really just being consistent and upfront, having that and, saying that from the very, very start, I think is a good thing, so that there's no confusion and so that everybody kind of knows what to expect. So I appreciate Ms. McPhail, you bringing that up, and I'm sure you all have been talking about it, but that's a really, really, really good point.
I think, one of the things that we all have to understand is School looks different now for a lot of families. And many families have had great success in the virtual setting. And the fact that they have been allowed to participate in extracurricular activities while still being virtual. That's something that is more than likely going to continue. And so I think given that, that point, I think we owe it to our families to say who is interested, who would like to continue doing this. Because while we have been very fortunate that they have based our funding on 18-19 enrollment, next year's enrollment will set the stage for beyond. And so if we don't offer these types of opportunities, how many students could we lose? And we're not in a position right now to do that. And so I just think we have to really be creative in the way that we think about this, but also to be very open that school's going to look different for a lot of kids moving forward.
I do think that's one of the things that sets Woodford County apart is just the focus and the willingness to do what's best for the students and the family. And so to be able to have that opportunity moving forward and to plan for that and have that as part of what our students are able to do in Woodford County, I think is just phenomenal. And again, I think it's just a testament to the staff and thank you.
So with as I mentioned, we've kind of phased out our planning process, and we had a great meeting with the teachers today just to it's the teacher group and get that perspective, then move on to district admin, principal, and then the parent survey to get all of those perspectives combined into one. So stay tuned for more on that as the months go on, leading into the summer. Equity update. At this point, we have mapped out our 2 remaining modules. The modules are the big significant piece of work that go into the schools. We were supposed to have all of these done by this point, but for obvious reasons, we've stretched it a little bit. Those last 2 modules are culturally responsive instruction and then culturally responsive classroom management. So the instruction one will lead right into summer as we go into different professional learning experiences, not only that we provide, but outside. And then the classroom management will be just prior to school starting next year so that they can apply that lens to each of those aspects of instruction. I mentioned last week about our collaboration project with WEAF. Those of you that are on the team, we spent a lot of time talking through that. We want to be very clear in what the intent of that is. So that was a great conversation we had last month, I guess this month, and we'll continue on our March meeting about what exactly that is. Generally, they want to help fund classroom grants, well, even beyond classroom. We talked about having student groups through this, teams, grants for projects that focus on diversity and equity and anything and issues around that. And our launch for that, what we're planning is for the beginning of next year. So we're taking a very, very careful steps, very intentional steps so that it is clear, it's concise, and hopefully well implemented next year. And then finally, and I mentioned this to the equity team at our last meeting, what we need to start working on now is a sustainability plan. There's a lot of things that have been front-loaded with current staff. When I mention these modules, we need to consider and figure out what we're going to do for new staff as they come aboard. We want them to have this training, this knowledge, but almost in a condensed version because we may not have the capacity to do it quite the extent that we're doing with everybody. So on our agenda for the March meeting will be a sustainability plan, particularly for our new staff and our continuing staff. How do we keep this ball rolling, so to speak? So that's my equity update for the month. Any questions or anything there?
No, but thank you to all of the members on the equity team for all of their work. Ms. Lass has actually stepped up to join as a board member, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all that you do in coordinating it. Your meetings are really well run and intentional, and you do a very nice job with it. I'm appreciative of your efforts.
Thank you.
Any other board members? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Asher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to our treasurer's report and approve the January financial report. Aside from that, are the online participants able to hear everybody okay?
Very well.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here to present the January monthly summary, the cash by funds, and the balance sheet report. Just to get started, I'll go ahead and get started. Like I normally do each month, I just go through specifically one of the reports, and this is the cash by fund report. If you look at the general fund, you'll notice as a highlight the expenditure of the 2.3 million, so the 2.318 million. Mainly, a lot of that is payroll on that piece. And then the special revenue fund, you'll again see that balance come down. Last time I mentioned there was a higher fund balance, and that's just based off timing from state grants coming in on the front end, and then expenses for like payroll and some non-payroll items coming in after that. Just skipping down through district and school, nothing to note there. Capital outlay, nothing there. Building fund, notice on the revenue piece, the 3 million on that. So there's a transfer. That's that transfer I was speaking to earlier on Fund 1. The money comes in and we report it to Fund 1. And then at some point in the year, we move a big chunk of the dollars that are dedicated just for the building fund into that particular fund. Construction fund, that $116,000 expense, that's for one of the payments for the architect. There'll be another corresponding payment for the architect here next month. Should be debt service fund. That's just that negative $334,000. That is basically paying the bond. That's the collective for bond payments for bonds or payments that we owe through the month of January. That negative will be offset by a transfer in the building fund in the coming months. Food service, again, you'll see that the food service is again profitable in terms of cash in the program of that $550,000 balance. Daycare, a balance.
Marcella, can I
Yes.
ask a question on the food service fund?
Yes.
That fund seems like it's getting much bigger than it was when I first joined the board. I think we used to be in the 300,000. Are there any big expenses that we are anticipating coming up with that?
I'm not knowledgeable of that. Both Ms. Courtney Quire and I have discussed that balance and have mentioned if there's any capital outlay expenses, that's what it's there for. She's done a great job in addition with her staff where, what she inherited was a non-profitable situation, if I'm not mistaken. And she's only grown that balance, from the hard work of her and her staff. So yes, that discussion has happened. If there's any capital outlay expenses that can be charged to that fund, please do so. But also being prudent in terms of only making expense that's truly needed. I worked with other districts in the past, and I've worked with some that were non-profitable. It was an issue of the district contributing to the balance, and then others that were significantly profitable. We actually run the risk of getting an audit finding if you exceed 3 months of fund balance. That's not here because the federal government wants to make sure you're spending your money. That's not the case here, but down the road, and hopefully this is a problem that we have to have in terms of an increased balance. That's a good thing. So anyway, that's also something as a side note that we've always got to pay attention to if it really gets really to a good measure.
Okay. And absolutely, we would all echo your compliments to Ms. Quire. She's done a wonderful job, as have all of our food service employees, especially during the pandemic time. They have really done an amazing job.
I do think one of the things that we have to keep in mind, that has contributed to the increase in the fund balance is that all meals have been free this year. And so we've been able to get reimbursement for every meal as opposed to just those for students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. And so that has had a positive impact on the fund balance. So it's not necessarily that we're hoarding money or anything along those lines, but that has had a significant contribution to that this year.
That makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Martello. Go ahead.
Okay. Daycare, the balance is a little bit north of 13,000, and then the community ed at 34,000. Top right corner on the CARES, we received a little bit above $500,000 overall in the CARES, and that includes, again, separate from the private school piece. So we're trending well and getting those dollars spent. We've actually have everything encumbered or obligated for the CARES for the most part of our piece, with the remaining cleaning services that's eating into the remaining balance on that CARES, and that's the nightly cleaning services as we have students in the buildings and staff for that caution and that safety prevention, for elimination of if there's any potential virus situation for cleanliness. Okay.
Mr. Martello, can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Have we considered what's going to happen to those expenses as we run out of CARES money, if those need to continue?
So the district or the leadership were proactive last year and actually set aside some money, reduced different budgets collectively across different budgets, and allocated a set aside for things like that. Once they go over and we exceed the CARES money. So to answer your question, yes.
Okay.
There is a specific line item budget at the district level expense for that.
Okay, great.
And when will the next payment be coming in on the next amount of CARES money?
Sure. This money, I would imagine, the first round, or what I call round one of ESSER, was reimbursed on a post-expenditure basis. So we already know our allocation amount is north of $2 million that has been allocated by KDE. So we already know that dollar, but in terms of us specifically receiving those funds, that will never happen. That will not happen if it's handled the same way as a majority of the federal funds. So as we spend it, we get reimbursed.
I see. They just give us a notification of the total amount
Yes.
that will be reimbursed.
Yes, and it does have the 3-year 2023 timeline in terms of expenditure on that piece.
Have the restrictions changed any on that money, or are we expecting any major changes there?
I don't think so. I think we're going to have some flexibility. I know one of the things that we've already targeted is our summer school programming. I think the thing that we don't have to have a budget, I think, ready until May. So we do have some time to plan this out. And I think that the thing that we have to remember is that we have until September of 2023. So it's you want to plan this for the long haul and not just how do we spend it all right now, because it's trying to, and some of that's very difficult because you're trying to forecast what you may need. But again, I think some of that is just trying to plan to say, okay, here are the things that we know that we want to do. And summer programming is definitely one of those. And then are there some things in the fall that we want our schools to be able to do? And so being able to kind of set that vision out there, but also knowing that we've got 2.5 years to spend those dollars.
Well, I will say I really appreciate all the thought and the planning that goes into making sure that the funds are really going, for our kids, for the remediation, for the help with all the gaps that we have from the kids being out, and then for the cleaning, and then, all the things that really are pandemic related that will really help our kids get back on track and hopefully a little ahead of track at some point. So thank you.
Continuing on the gears piece, again, we have nearly an $80,000 allocation that was awarded. We're chipping away at that balance, and hopefully we get those funds spent in the near future. One thing that we are doing since the last time we met is we're charging some of those remote devices, the MiFis or the Wi-Fi devices, that monthly charge, that's eating into that allocation each month, which is definitely a eligible expenditure. So,
Do we have as many of those as we need now?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The one-to-one device balance, a little bit north of a $15,000 balance there. So, and those are the big items for tonight. If any questions?
All right, let's just go around. Ms. Springate, do you have any questions?
I just have a quick question. I noticed the daycare and then the one-to-one device fund, we've kind of been trending where we're having more expenses than revenue in those. And I know that's something that, Mr. Hawkins, you all have kept a really close eye on and have been very proactive about, making sure that those balance, that there's no, general fund commitment required, that they sustain themselves. Is that something you guys are kind of looking at and working on right now? It sounds like maybe with the Gears Fund, that's something that is already on your.
Well, the daycare piece is one that we may not have a choice this year, just because the ETC program has not operated in a fashion that it normally does. So that one may end up in a negative. And I think what we're looking at is how do we get through this year? But then what steps do we need to take going into next year? Hopefully, if we're in school on a much more regular basis between now and the end of the year, that's going to help with the daycare operations. But it's still unknown at this point in time. But we've had multiple conversations that one could end up in a negative, and it's not anybody's fault. I mean, it's not like anything has been mismanaged or anything along those lines. It's just we haven't been able to operate the program that we normally operate. And then on the one-to-one, that's another one that we're going to have to really target next year in terms of if we're going to continue moving forward, basically with every student having something, there's probably going to have to be a fee charge in order for us to build those funds back up to be able to do that. We have tried to target the high school in particular because they're still lagging on some collections there, so that would help that. But it's just been a struggle in terms of trying to track all that down, and so we're going to continue to make efforts. But again, we may have to expand the fee piece of it next year.
All right, Ms. Richardson?
No, thank you.
Ms. McHale?
No other questions, thank you.
Ms. Glass? No, thank you. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Martello. We appreciate your insight as always.
And I would like to say publicly, Ms. Smith, last week, it's this week, Payroll Supervisor, she's given 27 years of service to the district, and she's definitely going to be at a loss. But we're trying to fill, or have filled those positions in terms of replacing Ms. Smith, but she's going to definitely be at a loss. And Ms. Mize, who took over her position, is going to do a great job. So I just want to say that.
Well,
Thank you.
congratulations to her on her retirement and our thanks for her service. That's awesome. Thank you so much for pointing that out. All right, we will move into the consent agenda. Mr. Hawkins, if there's anything you want to.
You need to approve.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Glass. All those in favor of approving the treasurer's report, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Now, Mr. Hawkins, would you like to move into the consent agenda? And if you want to do just anything that's of note.
Public comment is the next item. Is there anything?
I'm on a roll.
Oh, no public comment, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I couldn't hear with the mask.
Sorry.
There's no public comment, I'm sorry.
All right, on the consent agenda, I'll just highlight a couple of that are a little bit unusual that you don't always see because the donation, fundraiser, travel, surplus property, non-resident contracts, we do those pretty much every month or at least fairly frequently. the use of school bus. Anytime an outside entity wants to utilize our school buses, they have to request and the board has to approve that. Over the last several years, I guess, probably predates me, but St. John's Church does a reading camp every summer, and they request to utilize our buses to transport the students there. So that's what this request is. And then item G, and we're going to have some discussion about next year about tuition students, but this is to approve the tuition schedule. In other words, when people pay their tuition during the course of the year. So everything else, again, is fairly routine in terms of the consent agenda, but those are two items that you may not have seen before.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second? Second. Second by Ms. Glass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, now we're going to move up our agenda item G and have that at the beginning of our regular agenda. Ms. Glass, this was your agenda addition, so I will let you go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Yeah, I requested this item be added as a follow-up from our equity committee meeting that Ms. Springate and I attended earlier this month. It was asked by a member of the committee kind of what the board was doing to attract a diverse field of candidates for the superintendent position. So we kind of thought it would be prudent for the board to discuss because, you know, Whipper County has certainly made strides, you know, in this commitment with equity and moving forward. I certainly wasn't intending by my item to like request a certain candidate or recruitment of a certain candidate or anything. I was really mainly wanting to make sure that we continue to establish that commitment as a board, that equity was something that was important to us and that we could make sure that we attract a candidate that has been involved in equity in similar districts and in their career as well. So I was mainly wondering, hopefully Mr. Martin could maybe help us, could weigh in and help us kind of identify some questions, maybe that we could field to our screening committee, kind of with respect to this matter.
All right.
Okay. Do you want me to respond at this time?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so we are about halfway through the application process at this time. I believe March 12th is the deadline for the application window to be completed. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a meeting scheduled for, I think, March 23rd. If that's incorrect, I certainly need to know that tonight. But anyway, and that will be the meeting where we will reveal the demographic information of the candidate pool. That's when it'll be made to the board and also to the general public, the news media, and everyone concerned in open session. As far as what we do and what we don't do, we have disseminated the vacancy information to a large group of people. We have, obviously the district has placed it on the KEP site at the state level. We have advertised it on the School Boards Association site. I have sent an email to every superintendent's office in Kentucky with the advertisement attached for the position, telling each superintendent to forward that information on to any potential candidates. We have done all of that. We have also reached out to different groups. Now, what we don't do is what you alluded to earlier. We don't recruit specific candidates. We're not a headhunter group. Your school board association, I don't think you want us to be headhunting individual particular people. If people contact me about the position, obviously I tell them everything I know about it. But we do try to get out as much information to various groups as we can. For example, there's about 20 female superintendents in Kentucky. I've reached out to that group to make sure that they know that the position is available, that the position is open. and that the board is wanting to employ the best person for the position, whether that is male or female. I also have reached out to a member of the National Alliance of Black School Educator, and that person is going to disseminate the information nationally to that group that they're a member of. There are also going to be minority representation that's going to be on the search committee. And if a lot of it is going to be determined starting tomorrow night, to be honest with you, with our public forum of criteria that the board will be adopting to guide the search committee. If diversity and diverse candidates is a priority with the board, then they need to make that clear to the search committee that that is a valued attribute that they would like to see, along with many other attributes, I'm sure. So there's a lot of dissemination of information that's taken place all over the state to different groups. Our goal is to try to get as wide a diverse applicant pool as we can, to try to have a wide net cast, so to speak, to give the search committee and the board the biggest opportunity to find the best fit for the Woodford County School District. As far as what we've done in recent past, last year I facilitated superintendent searches in 4 districts. 2 of those districts ended up hiring people within their system. 2 districts hired people outside their system. 2 districts hired men. 2 districts hired women. 3 districts hired white, and 1 hired an African American superintendent. So I think the recent history that we've had is that we get the information out to a large group of people, try to find the best candidate possible for each school district and the best fit for each school district. So that's been our focus. I have entertained a lot of questions from potential candidates. I have relayed information that the position is really open for the best candidate, that the Woodford County School Board wants to hire the best candidate regardless of any category, but I try to get the information out to as many groups as I can.
Thank you so much. Ms. Glass?
Well, I think that's great. I like the information, that you have letting us know every place that the information's been shared, and I think that will definitely cast a wide net for the best applicants.
All right.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. I didn't quite hear it all.
She said that she felt like that would cast a wide net for the best applicants.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Do any
other questions?
I think we'll just go around and give each board member a chance. Ms. Springate?
Can you hear me? Or am I still echoing?
Ms. Richardson, can you hear Ms. Springate when she talks?
I barely heard her just then. I didn't know if she said anything or not.
I'm gonna try my mic.
Let me try again, Bob.
It's fine. I mean, the speaker's right there.
So. Okay, I can hear her now.
Okay, I'll just try to speak up. I don't really know what to say. We received an email from a community member in February that was just kind of questioning 3 motions that we had at the planning agenda. And I guess if we just kind of go back to that as a beginning, what happened was we were just finding out, just accepting the superintendent's resignation, and we were deciding how to move forward at that point. So it was a new situation for all of us. At that point, I requested that we do a request for proposal where we would get information from different agencies about what they would be able to do for us in terms of assisting us with the superintendent search. And we would be able to kind of say what information was important to us, and we would kind of start from the very, very beginning looking for, diversity. That's something that we've been working on as a district with our equity team for the past, couple of years. And so I think, that night we decided, there was a vote held and we decided to hire KSBA. And at that point, we didn't know what services you would be able to provide, and we didn't know how much the services were going to cost. So I think at that point, in my mind, I thought we were hiring a search firm, a firm that would help us recruit candidates in. And so I guess, I just feel like the board, the past board, has been very vocal. Board member Ambrose Wilson, former board member, stated that our district was failing in terms of minority hiring. And I believe his public statement was most likely directed at our superintendent and principals, but it does accurately apply to the Board of Education also. To my knowledge, the board has never hired a minority candidate for a position it has an authority to hire for. And while our schools have made progress in this critical area, the board has not. So we've conveyed a message that we have no excuses for our staff when it comes to recruiting minority candidates, but it appears we are holding ourselves to a very different standard. Basically, it sounds like what we're doing at this point is just posting the position and hoping that minority applicants will apply. And as Mr. Wilson stated, we really must do better. I know Fayette County is in the process of hiring a new superintendent also, and I'm wondering if you could kind of reach out to them and see how they plan to intentionally engage their community and seek a diverse candidate for the position, Mr. Martin. Is that something you could help us with?
I would have to discuss this with the executive director. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear everything that there's an echo, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit hearing impaired anyway. So,
I'm so sorry. Basically,
I seem to hear.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe, Danny, I can hear you a little bit better from your microphone. Could you paraphrase what the request is?
I think that what she's asking is if you would be able to contact Fayette County and talk a little bit with them about what they're doing to recruit intentionally diverse candidates.
Yeah, I can do that if the board wants me to. I spent a couple hours with the Fayette County group early in their process setting up the procedures that they would use. But Fayette County has always used an out-of-state search firm. And I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think the focus of that is that they actively recruit nationwide particular candidates that they focus on. Obviously, if Woodford County wants to go in this direction, we would have to bow out of that. We're not a national search firm. We don't have the staff for that. We would graciously bow out of that process if that's the focus that the board wanted to go, because we come from a different direction with the Kentucky School Boards Association. We're not a group that focuses singling out individual candidates. Ours is more of a process group approach where we put out as much information as we can to as many people as we can, but we don't encourage individual people, a headhunter, for lack of a better term, like a national search firm would.
I think we need to be intentionally careful to note that this is not a board voted upon action. This is just something that Ms. Springate's bringing up for the first time now, and it would require board action to change that path. Ms. Richardson, do you have any thoughts, or were you finished?
No, I wasn't finished. I'll be brief. I do think that it may make sense to involve our equity committee, since we have an equity committee in Woodford County, with this search. And again, Ms. Glass and I were both at the last equity committee meeting when this issue came up and the request was made that we really recruit and seek minority candidates for this position. And I don't think it's a request that's out of the way or surprising in any way, given our focus on equity in the district over the past few years. So I would ask that we revise the job listing with input from our equity committee, and that maybe extend our deadline, our timeline from 30 days to 60 days so that we can do that. Also, I would hope that we would be able to engage a diverse group of community leaders to solicit their ideas and suggestions. I think that, to just it's not too late for us to kind of go back and kind of set some things in place that maybe we should have been aware of or should have discussed a little earlier. I think extending the timeline is not going to in any way harm us. We would still have a superintendent in plenty of time prior to Mr. Hawkins' retirement. So, if we hire that person in June instead of May, I don't think that that's really, does any harm to the district in any way. And I do think that the greater good is that we are, actively doing what we're asking our staff to do. We're actively doing what we say in meetings is important to us, and that we're actively doing some recruitment, just like we have Mr. Wells do every year for our teachers and our staff. Maybe, some of the things that he does for teacher and staff recruitment, we could also do as recruitment for this position. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with, having a small applicant pool, but I do think the larger and the more diverse your applicant pool, the larger and the more diverse your recruitment efforts, the better that is for our district.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Richardson?
I would just like to say that I think that that Mr. Martin has made it very clear that KSBA and himself are reaching out to everyone who would like to apply for the job. I'm grateful for their effort, and I know that we've had that with the effort that they're putting out, that we will have plenty of qualified candidates to select from to be our new superintendent. I do disagree that we need to extend the deadline. I think that we've made it very clear that time is of the essence in this matter, and our community deserves for us to move forward, make a selection out of the qualified candidates that we get in that time.
Thank you. Ms. McHale?
I also agree. I do think that it's time is of the essence in getting our candidate pool. We are having our community forum tomorrow night. We have plans on sending out surveys to the community via several different options to get their input into the requirements for what we'll be looking for, and ultimately what we'll be asking a diverse group to identify the final candidates for us. I do feel like KSBA is going to cast a wide net, and at the end of the day, if we don't feel like the pool is what we would like to see, we'll always have a chance to go back again as well. But I do think that we need to continue forward. I think we need to move quickly. It's very concerning to me to get somebody here that will have some time with Mr. Hawkins before the position turns over.
Thank you. Ms. Glass?
I agree. I do think time is of the essence, and I felt like that the question that we were asked in the equity committee was, what is the board doing? How is the process being handled to make sure we're attracting a diverse field of candidates? And I feel comfortable with Mr. Martin's answer, what he has done and what KSBA does. I'm also would be concerned about the cost if we were to expand our search efforts and use maybe a bigger firm. That is something that I'm not sure that, obviously we're not Fayette County, so I'm not sure that that's something that we could afford at this time or that would be beneficial. But like I said, I mean, I'm satisfied with the answers in the process that Mr. Martin has done to this point.
Okay. And I think my thoughts in weighing in, I certainly value your input, Ms. Springate. I think that while I understand the thought behind the measures that you have suggested, I think that we can also be intentionally aware of the different candidates' commitment to equity and to inclusion, and that we can ask questions to ask what have you done in your district to effectively make positive changes for equity. I think those are questions that we can use as a screening tool. I'm not sure that we need to kind of start all over. And to Ms. Glass's point, we aren't Fayette County. There's kind of two huge districts in the state, and then there's the rest of us that don't have those same tools at our disposal. I think we need to be intentional in the questions that we ask our applicants, and honor our commitment to the equity team in that way. And I do think that reaching out to anyone in the community leaders that you've discussed, for their input. Obviously, our doors are always open. Our phones are available, our email is available, and we welcome any input. We've taken several steps. We're having the forum tomorrow night. We've advertised it in the newspaper 2 weeks. We've allowed for mail-in comments. We've allowed for email comments. We've posted it on our website. It's been shared several other places. I think we are trying to solicit community input as much as we possibly can, and I'm hopeful that the community and the equity team see that we are reaching out and valuing their input. That would be where I stand on this.
Well, thank you. And I certainly don't think that we are Fayette County and that we have to spend millions and millions of dollars on recruitment. But I do believe that we can be a leader in the state for inclusion and diversity. And simply saying, we want to recruit a minority candidate and then hoping minority candidates apply is not really a strategy or an action item. Again, we have the equity committee. We did not get any input from them regarding the superintendent search or the recruitment of that. And to say, the posting ends in just a few days, we can just kind of hope that they get online at KSBA or KDE, or maybe one of the superintendents in the other district will reach out to someone in their district for us. Probably isn't really an evidence-based approach to recruitment. So obviously I'm a little disappointed. I do think at some point we really have to have our actions match our words and our rhetoric. And I think that Woodford County can absolutely be a leader with equity and with diversity, but it will take action. I mean, it will take some real intentional action on our part. And the other thing I would just say is if we hire a superintendent in May, which that's our timeline now, that person would not start and shadow and work with Mr. Hawkins in June until he retires in July. Would they, Mr. Hawkins? I mean, my understanding is you have one superintendent, you pay for one superintendent, and then when one staff member leaves, another staff member comes in and is then employed in that position. How does that actually work?
I mean, the person would not officially start unless the separate position was created. Could they work on their own time with me? Yes. But there could not be two superintendents simultaneously.
So basically, you might have somebody come, if they already have a job, they would resign from that job or retire, however they would do that, and then they would, come and work with us. So there would probably be some interaction, but it wouldn't be like a week long or a month long or a 2 month long training. So if we hired someone in June, we really aren't losing any time. There's no real sense of urgency that we have to have somebody in place by May. I think just really getting someone in place is a good goal, but getting the right person in place and having a wide pool of candidates, to me is just something that's very important.
I think we all share that desire. I think there's a couple things of note. The job posting does not close in a couple of days. It's got 20 days left. It's open until March 12th, and it's only February 22nd. So there's a good block of time still available. The other thing is Mr. Martin did share with us that he has sent this listing out to 2 minority school leadership groups, and we have to be cognizant of that having been a step in the right direction. The other thing is we do have a statutory obligation to fill the screening committee within 30 days of the vacancy. So that precludes us opening up that process more than it already is for putting that screening committee in place.
Well, Mr. Martin, can you weigh in on that? Originally, you told us we could advertise the job for 45 to 60 days.
Right. I'm not.
Can you just weigh in on if that's still a possibility, or is that something that cannot happen now?
My timeline has been adopted by the board. I go by the wishes of the board. The timeline for me, it's out there. I mean, it's been advertised. The timeline that the board has adopted. I've never altered that, to be honest with you. That's not saying it could not be, but most of the school people in Kentucky know when that application deadline is.
Okay, thank you. And I do think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to sour the process at this stage in the game. I don't think we want to cast doubt or aspersions on what hasn't been done to find the right person. We're following the rules. We're following the statutes. We're listening to the guidance of the group that does the most superintendent selection searches in the state of Kentucky. This is not something that Woodford County has gone off the rails and kind of made our own path on. I want to make sure that we are cognizant of that fact.
Well, and I also want to be clear and just say that discussing the recruitment of a minority candidate for the superintendent position at the request of the equity committee is not something that is casting aspersions on Woodford County in any way, shape, or form. It's merely saying we have some information and input from community members asking us to stop, to look at what we're doing, and to say, hey, if we can do this better, why wouldn't we? So that's not casting aspersions. It's merely discussing and bringing forth constituents' views in an open forum, which is where we have to do that.
Okay, and I think maybe Ms. Glass's interpretation of what the equity committee was requesting is different. I don't think she, from what she has said tonight, thought that they were asking us to stop the process.
Yeah, no, that's not what I thought. I took the question just as, what was the board doing to make sure that a diverse candidate pool was being sought. I didn't take it as, what are you doing to specifically recruit a specific candidate of diversity? I took it as that the question was that we just want to make sure that the pool is out there for a diverse candidate and that they are getting the same information that, that like Mr. Martin said, I mean, he listed, specifically 3 different groups of minorities that he had published this information. And that's the way I took the question. I did not take it as that we had to stop the process and, move forward with a specific candidate of diversity.
Yeah. And to be clear, I don't want to stop the process. I just wanted to extend that so that we could include recruitment of minority candidate. And I don't want to hire a specific person. I just want to make sure that we're recruiting candidates from a diverse pool. And so, again, I don't think that we're saying anything different. I just think that, maybe we have different interpretations about what the equity committee was asking, and then the level of involvement the equity committee should possibly have with the process. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do any other board members have input? Ms. Richardson?
No, thank you.
Ms. McHale?
No, thank you.
Okay. We will move on to our next agenda item. Mr. Martin, I think we are, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just waving.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your input and thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I will, my procedure is 1 week prior to the deadline, I will reboot all of the information I send out to all the groups, reminding them that the deadline is down to 1 week and we want a diverse group of candidates as possible, and as many candidates of all kinds as possible. And I'll send that out to all the superintendents to disseminate to their staffs when we get to 1 week prior to the deadline.
Okay, thank you. And if a board member found another professional group of school leaders that they wanted you to send that out to them. Is that something you'd be okay with if there's?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
So if any board member finds anything like that they would like for Mr. Martin to reach out and contact, please feel free.
No
to
problem. Be glad to.
Contact him directly and we'll move on from there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda. Now we'll go back up to regular agenda item A, accept notification of personnel matters. Is there a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Glass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item B is accept notification of payment of bills. Is there a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. McHale. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item C is approving the meeting minutes of January 19th, 2021, January 25th, 2021, and January 25th at 6 p.m., 2021. Is there a motion to approve these meeting minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Glass. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. McHale. All those in favor say aye.
I did have some discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to say that we all received an email on February the 11th from a community member. And after we received that email, I did go back and look at the minutes. And I noticed that we are missing a couple of motions in the minutes. I think that probably happened because they were not action items, but they were added, which really goes to the point of the email. A couple of items that were added. One was the motion for request for proposal that didn't pass, and one was the motion to hire KSDA, and that did pass. And again, I don't think it was the secretary's fault. I think what happened was we had motions on items that were just discussion items, and so I think those would probably need to be amended.
Did you share that information before tonight's meeting so that could be done before?
Well, no, that's my opinion, and so I brought it up in open forum publicly for everyone so that could be discussed. Right. Maybe others have different opinions. I'm not sure. That's just what I recall from the meeting. And again, I just thought that after I read the email from a community member, which specifically referenced us taking action on items that were not listed as items on the agenda that could be for action items. They were listed as discussion items. So I think that's where the issue came about. So I'm asking that if that's what everyone else thinks, that we would amend the minutes before we actually pass them.
Okay. Since we're referencing the communication, I had thought we would do it during communications, but we can do that now. A community member reached out and asked that we review board policy 01.45 and was kind of questioning 3 motions that were made under a discussion item. They note that Mr. Chenoweth made it clear that was not in conflict with the Open Records Act. However, this person felt that was in conflict with board policy. Mr. Chenoweth, could you weigh in on this a bit? I did forward this email to Mr. Chenoweth in anticipation of it being discussed as a communication tonight.
Yes, on the specific point of what Ms. Springate just brought up, I have not reviewed those minutes, but certainly the actions, I do have the same recollection she does as to the motions that were made following the superintendent's announcement of his retirement. And the minutes, I'm trying to open those up now to look at them, but the minutes do need to reflect the motion that she made to issue an RFP that failed, and the motion that was made to move forward with KSBA. So if those are not in the minutes, they do need to be amended before they're approved. On the community member communication, I'll essentially just stick with what I shared with you during the meeting. The notion in your agendas of having discussion items and action items, that's not stated anywhere within that policy that's referenced. If that's implied by that policy language, I wouldn't have read it that way. It says no item, issue, or subject shall be added to the agenda for action that has not been previously placed on the agenda. But there's nothing in there about items being designated as solely for discussion and others as solely for action. So I take that reference to being added to the agenda for action as just topics that were not already on the agenda. And my advice during that meeting was the matters that were being voted on, the topic was on the agenda, and the fact that it was made an action item rather than a discussion item, I don't believe is in conflict with this policy. If the majority of the board feels like that is inconsistent with the policy, my recommendation is that the board revise the policy to be more clear, because I certainly would not have read it that way. The policy doesn't really reference that there would be a work meeting and then an action item meeting, or that there is some notion that action shouldn't be taken on items during the work session, the first meeting of the month. I think you all moved to a 2-meeting per month process after the last revision to this policy, so this policy wasn't changed. I don't think. This policy has not been changed since you all went to the 2-meeting schedule. So I understand the point made by that community member, but I don't see the action as really being in conflict with either the language or the spirit of the policy that was brought up in that letter. If the majority of the board feels like they agree with that input, I would suggest that this policy needs to be revised to reflect the spirit, because it certainly doesn't violate the word of the policy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, is it your recommendation that we should table the approval of the minutes until we have time to review them, or what do you recommend we do on this?
We may want to table the action meeting from the 25th so that we have the opportunity to go back and review to make sure we get all of the actions that were taken. You can probably still move forward with the January 19th and the 5 o'clock meeting from January 25th, but I would recommend that you table the January 25th, 6 o'clock board meeting minutes until the March meeting.
Okay, and is there any further board discussion about that?
Yes, I do believe that we need to follow Mr. Chenoweth's advice and sort through publicly, and we can do that when we get to the communication item if you want, how we are going to handle this. Since I've been on the board, we've always had 2 meetings. One's always been a planning meeting where we discuss things, and the community knows that's the time for discussion and input, and then the regular meeting, which is the time we traditionally take action. And so this wouldn't be an issue tonight had we followed that. Really, it's just how we've always done business. If we followed that, we wouldn't have an issue with the minutes. So I think that when we don't follow the policy, or it's unclear, or there's some confusion, it just causes all sorts of problems that compound. So basically what the community members said was, we have the 2 meetings a month, 1 planning, 1 regular, and at planning is mostly for discussion unless there's something urgent, in which case it's noted specifically and everybody, the public, everybody, the board is aware that there will be action taken. And if there isn't, then it causes some ambiguity and some problems and some confusion, and then, further problems down the line. And it also really disenfranchises the public, because if they had no idea that we were going to be hiring KSBA at that planning meeting, then how could they have had input? How could we have gotten input from them and been able to really represent our constituents? So if we continue to do it the way that the communication reads and the way that the agenda reads, then we really won't have those problems in the future.
Yeah, and of note again, the policy does not in any place discuss a planning and a regular meeting.
However, we have a planning and a regular meeting.
But we very often vote on things for action during the planning meeting. We have done it since I have been on the board for sure, and I remember coming to meetings where it happened before that. There are certain times that Mr. Hawkins asks for that because it's something that's time sensitive.
And it's clearly labeled as an action item. This is a little bit different, so that's why it's hard for anybody to record the minutes or know what happened. I definitely think there's a way to do it, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed and agreed upon. So if there's some confusion or some difference of opinion about the agenda or about the policy, the board meeting policy on agenda, 01.45, then that's something like Mr. Chenoweth has suggested that we need to clarify and we need to make sure that we're doing this properly because, again, this is an ongoing issue. We want to make sure that we're doing this properly. I also think that there's some merit to having a training for the board and for the board to adopt Robert's Rules of Order because at times we do follow Robert's Rules of Order and at other times we really don't. So I just think we need to be very clear that we want to be transparent with the community. We want them to know what we're going to be voting on, and we want to be able to record our minutes to reflect that. And we can't really do that if we're just kind of adding things on, for action when it doesn't really help with the transparency or building the trust. So I think that the community members' email really has a lot of good input in it. And I think that we should just have that discussion and make that decision and then move forward so that we don't continually have these issues month after month.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes.
What repercussions would not approving these minutes tonight, this is just for information only, not approving these minutes tonight have on the action that we took at those meetings?
Mr. Chenoweth, I don't think.
There's none. The Open Meetings Act requires that minutes be available to the public under the Open Records Act no later than following the next meeting. But very frequently, most boards, I think, have the same practice you all do of approving 3 or 4 or 5 sets of minutes at a meeting. And even if they were released under the Open Records Act, marked as draft or as not yet approved, that's fine. It doesn't affect the validity of action taken. What's more important is that the minutes be accurate to reflect all of the votes. That is what's required by the Open Meetings Act, is that the minutes reflect every action that was taken, and that includes no votes, failed votes on motions. Case law for more than a century has said boards of education speak only through their minutes, so your minutes need to be accurate. It's more important to get them right than to get them done quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McHale?
The only thing that I wanted to say was that I do believe that we need some flexibility among us as well. And if we're saying that we can only do something at this time and only do something at that time, there are going to be things that happen that are time sensitive, that need to be addressed, that only get brought to light through the discussion that we're having. And maybe we do need to make a decision at that time. It's very concerning to me that we would be so strict that we would never be able to do that at one meeting because it says we cannot. I don't believe what I heard from Mr. Chenoweth was that we had to make a clarification in there. So I feel like we're really restricting ourselves and opening ourselves up for more of this revisiting if we don't allow ourselves to have discussion and take action on very few items that come up outside of the norm. And I think if we address those, we document those, they're available, then I think we're really boxing ourselves in.
Just a point of clarification, and this is a suggestion I would make at any time, and I think Grant would agree. If you're in doubt, put it on as an action item. That gives you the flexibility to either discuss it and not take action, or to take action. But when you list something as a discussion item, that's what kind of puts you in the box, because you don't really have the option to take action. And I think that's where the confusion lies in this particular situation, is that if you're in doubt, put it on as an action item. And I think then that would alleviate a lot of the issues or concerns, because then if you're not ready to take action, you don't have to. It doesn't mean you have to take action when it's listed that way, but you have the ability to do that.
And have the flexibility to do that at either of those meetings if it's necessary.
Right. And again, we typically try not to have too many action items on the planning meeting, but there are times when we do. And we always list them as an action item, because it may be time sensitive that we have to get something submitted or whatever the case may be, or we want to try to move as quickly as we can when we create a new position. We want to try to do that as quickly as we can. But the fact that we list it as an action item on the agenda then gives you the flexibility to either discuss it and not take action, or to discuss it and take action. That was the only point I was trying to make, is that.
Ms. Glass?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the January 19th, 2021 and January 25th, 2021, 5 p.m. meeting of the board minutes?
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. McHale and a second by Ms. Richardson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Item D is the new school board attorney. If everybody could grab your calendars on this one. I think everyone received an email from Mr. Hawkins that we would try and schedule 2 days of interviews in the week of March 1st to March 5th. And we've gotten the availability. Mr. Hawkins, do you have that handy? If not, I can.
It appears that we will need to have at least two evenings. I think you could do the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. Any of those days. I would not advise probably a Friday. So we could do some on the first, second, third, or fourth, and then depending on the availability, we could schedule the other ones. But we could get all 5, but it would take 2 evenings, where we would get probably 3 on one evening and 2 on another.
Okay. Is there any day in specific that doesn't work for a board member?
I cannot on the 4th.
Anybody else?
If we could avoid the 2nd, but I can make it work if we need to.
Okay, so the 2nd and the 4th. Then would the 1st and the 3rd work for everyone? So that's Monday, yes. March 1st and Wednesday, March 3rd.
What time?
I think probably aim for 5 if that works for everyone.
Can we do 5:15?
Sure.
Or 5. Yeah, we can do 5.
I don't want to be a real pain in the butt.
Sure. Do 5:30. 5:15 or 5:30 so you're not stressed.
5:15 would be
okay. Does that work for you, Ms. Springate?
Yes.
And Ms. Richardson, 5:15 okay for you for a starting time?
Yes.
Did you say 5:30, so no stress, or did you say 5:15?
She said 5:15.
5:15 works.
Okay.
Get it done sooner.
All right, so we will plan.
We'll get those scheduled and get the schedule sent out to you.
Perfect. So Monday and Wednesday at 5:15, and we'll do 3 one night and 2 the second.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. All right. Item E is first reading of updated code of ethics. Ms. Springate.
That was an update that I think Mr. Chenoweth sent to all of us, and we all got to read it. I don't have anything additional. I would just make a motion that we have the first reading of the code of ethics.
Okay,
I'll second it.
second, and Mr. Hawkins, do you by chance have that?
No. Do not. I think it was attached, but I do not have a copy of it.
I've got it here. And
They have a.
oh, that's okay, thank you. Mr. Chenoweth, do we need to read the entirety of the code or just the part that's added on?
The only change is the additional final paragraph, so it would be sufficient to read just that final paragraph.
All right, so we are looking at the Board of Education Code of Ethics, and it's document number 01.53 with the addition of bullet number 9 is be responsible and respectful in their use of electronic communications and avoid social media by protecting confidential information received in their role as board member, avoiding group texts or email chains which might violate public meeting laws, complying with record retention rules where applicable, avoiding communications and posts which negatively impact the reputation of the district or which interfere with or disrupt the educational mission of the district, and by clearly indicating the content is the member's personal view and is not on behalf of the district or board collectively. And I do think on this that the recommendation or the information that the board received from Mr. Chenoweth was that there was neither a recommendation for or against the adoption of this revision. So we have now complied with the first reading of the Code of Ethics. Is there any further action necessary on that, Mr. Hawkins?
No, ma'am.
All right. Moving on
A full
to the
vote.
next item is.
I've got a first and a second, but not a full vote.
Oh, we didn't finish the vote.
Oh. All those in favor of the first reading, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. The next item is bid renewal for student pictures.
This is just a one-year extension on the current bid that we have with Strawbridge. They have performed in accordance with the bid specifications, so we would recommend extending that for a year.
All right. Is there a motion to extend the contract with Strawbridge Pictures? There's a motion by Ms. Springate and a second by Ms. Glass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And now we move on. There's no old business noted. As for communications, the only communication that I had to share tonight has already been.
You had added an item on tonight, item H. Appoint, are you going?
Oh, yes, thank you. So, item H is appointment of board member to the superintendent steering committee. And we've already had the vote to add this and been advised that a vote is not needed to take action. So I will serve on that committee as the chair. And board member communications, what I was going to say is the only communication that I had that had not, that we've kind of discussed now was from the community member discussing board policy 1.45. Everything else that I have had this month has been shared with the board up till now. Ms. Springate?
None.
Ms. Richardson?
I'm good, thank you.
Ms. McHale?
I did receive one resume for our superintendent search, which I forwarded on individually to Mr. Martin tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Glass?
I as well received one resume for superintendent candidate that I also forwarded to Mr. Martin.
Thank you. And actually, now that you say this, I also got it and sent it to Mr. Martin, so I'm guessing he probably got 5 copies of the same email. So, All right. And discussion items. Mr. Hawkins, the COVID update.
Well, I said it earlier, we're orange. That's a positive, and we certainly hope that trend continues. You know, the obvious goal would be to get our students back in school 5 days per week. And so that has been the plan since January, and that's what we will proceed with. Obviously, if things change, we will continue with the current model. Again, very pleased that our staff is going to receive the second dose on Friday. So that is a good thing. Particularly if you saw the new guidance from the CDC about quarantines for staff, that will be huge for us moving forward. So that's really all I have at this point.
I have one question. You said, when are you anticipating getting the information out for next week? Because I know we are in orange, which is a lot of chit chat going on at the school. Everybody talking about it. So
It'd probably be either Thursday night or Friday morning. Okay. Keep in mind, we're out of school on Monday already for a professional development day. So we do have an extra day there to make
next
plans.
Monday?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And then we also have the all virtual day on Friday.
On Friday, yes.
And, all right. Next item is out of district tuition.
Come on up, Mr. Wells.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So as most of you know, we have an out-of-district tuition process. We approved the schedule earlier in the meeting. So in a typical year, this is about the time where families would reach out to me and want to talk about the process, want to talk about, what do they need to do to apply, and I kind of go over that with them. As you recall, earlier in the school year, the board put a moratorium on accepting any new tuition students. So we've not accepted any new out-of-district students this year since that moratorium. So since this is the time of year, and I have already gotten questions from out-of-district families asking about the potential to come next year, just wanted to get some direction from you guys on, are we still keeping a moratorium in place? Are we opening them back up? Are we going to wait and see? So just want to kind of get some guidance from you all on how you want me to respond to those families that reach out and ask those questions.
I would ask, what are your thoughts? How do you feel like things stand? I mean, when the moratorium was requested, it was a very fluid situation with COVID and staffing. What is your impression? And Mr. Hawkins, what is yours?
I don't know that I have strong feelings one way or the other. I will say, even in a regular year, we always look at space where there's available space. So we would not look at taking any students at a grade level or at a school that we feel like we just don't have the space for that. And so the way things are trending, they're trending in a more positive direction. I think we're in a better position to look at taking students next year. But like I say, just kind of want to get that direction from you on what you all think.
Well, and I think with the space issue, as Mr. Hawkins mentioned earlier, I think there's going to be some students that decide that virtual instruction is for them, and that does give us a little bit more leeway with space in probably all of our schools. Maybe not specific grade levels, but probably each of our schools will see a reduction in some of those kids coming back.
Well, I think too, when that discussion was had back in the fall, not all school districts were in person.
Yeah.
And this was to prevent district hopping, basically, to go from one district that was not in person to a district that was in person. And so that's not really as big a factor right now. I think all the 4 or 5 districts are back in person at this point in time. And so, but I do know families like to plan ahead. And so I do think, given the process that we have in place, I think that it's a really good process, and I think then we're in control of how many come in and where they come in and what grade levels. And Southside's been closed to, tuition for the last several years. I anticipate they'll continue to be closed to, so that's part of our process. So I don't see any harm in us looking at doing that for next year, given that this is kind of the time that starts to roll
out. I always work with the
principal. Mr. Wells?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Are we specifically talking about new tuition students? Are we talking about returning tuition students as well as new tuition students?
This would just be, all tuition students, even the returning students, they reapply every year, but typically as long as they've done well for us and we continue to have the space, we would accept those. So yes, my question tonight is just moving forward on new applications from new families. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And do we need to vote on reopening that or just?
I don't think so. I think the way I took it was for this year only. So as long as that was kind of the consensus of the board, it really doesn't change anything that we're already doing.
Yeah, I think that we, as a board, would defer to you guys. You know the situation, and if you feel like it's a good idea to start it back, then that's fine, I think.
Okay. As I was going to say earlier, I always work with the principal of each school anytime we get a request, and always, again, make sure that we have the space. We always look at grades, attendance, discipline from a family that applies from out of district. So we will continue to do those things.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Wells. Thank you. All right. Do we have a need for an executive session? All right. Thank you. Then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Springate, second by Ms. Glass. I can see you're chomping at the bit. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for your time.
Do we have one final meeting?
Oh, yes, and we need to have a finance report. Quick meeting, please. So we will adjourn the regular meeting.
Just to approve the minutes. You just have to call it to order and approve them.
All right. So we will call to order the finance court, or is it just a regular? Finance court meeting.
I think Ms. Richardson hopped off, so it may be a 4-0. So.
Okay. And Mr. Hawkins, quickly, could you explain the finance court to our new members?
I think we did this at the last meeting when we had it.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. All right, then. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Corporation meeting from January 19th?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Springate. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. McHale. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Meeting is adjourned. Me.
Thank you.
Are we good? Hey, Scott, don't